Good afternoon, everyone. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to another enriching session of ICS book discussion. My name is Amit Dogra, and I am a research intern at the Institute of Chinese Studies, and I am honored to serve as the master of ceremony for today's session. I extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you who has joined us. As China rises, its military strength and economic capabilities have drawn attention globally. However, less is discussed about its internal dynamics and culture. Therefore, to demystify the concealed understanding of Chinese society, we embark upon a journey through the lens of the book titled Contemporary China, Tradition and Modernity. This book is about contemporary China, relationships, and negotiations between state and society across the realm of tradition and modernity. It is an exploration of societal issues, gender issues, and several other concerns, including environmental goals and the impact of religious beliefs in China. For today's book discussion, we have with us Ms. Poonam Suri, Mr. Ravi Bhutalingam, and Professor Srimati Chakrabarti. Ms. Poonam Suri is the author of the book Contemporary China, Tradition and Modernity. She is an adjunct fellow at the ICS. An economist by training, she is an independent researcher and analyst. She has taught at Delhi University and subsequently in Bhutan, New York, and Beijing. Her writing ranges across academia, poetry, and journalism. She has previously published two books on China titled China, A Search for Its Soul, published in 2009, and China, Confucius in the Shadows, published in 2015. Mr. Ravi Bhutalingam is the founder and chairman of Manas Advisory, which focuses on top management coaching, integrating psychological science with on ground management experience. He is also an honorary fellow at the Institute of Chinese Studies. Under the mentorship of renowned scientist and sinologist Joseph Needham, Mr. Bhutalingam received specialized training in psycholinguistics, scientific method, and Chinese culture. Throughout his career, Mr. Bhutalingam has held prominent leadership positions in various fields, both in India and abroad. His research interests are Chinese economy, history, and Confucianism. He has written extensively about how application of science and psychology can enhance understanding between India and China. Professor Srimati Chakrabarti is the chairperson of the Governing Council and honorary fellow of the Institute of Chinese Studies. She is former professor of Chinese Studies at the Department of East Asian Studies, University of Delhi. She has authored several books, including China and the Naxalites, Mao, China's Intellectuals and the Cultural Revolution, and China. She has also edited Higher Education in China, Select Perspectives, and co-edited Taiwan Today. She has published several articles in journals, magazines, and newspapers and contributed chapters to books. In 2010, she was conferred China-India Friendship Award by Chinese Premier Wang Jiabao. Before I hand over to Mr. Ravi Bhutalingam, I would request all participants to adhere to some housekeeping rules. All participants are requested to remain muted during the presentation. You may post your question in the chat box or you may use the raise hand option during the interactive session. After the presentation, you will be called upon to unmute yourself and ask questions. Please remember to mention your name and affiliation while posting your questions. I now hand over the floor to Mr. Bhutalingam to take the proceedings forward. Over to you, Mr. Bhutalingam.
Thank you, Amit. Uh, Welcome, friends, to this program, the book discussion program of the Institute of Chinese Studies. It gives me great pleasure today to welcome our author, Poonam Suri. I will not spend time on introducing her in detail, that has been done. But I would like to say that when she wrote her first book, that is China, A Search for Its Soul, I did a book review of that book, and we had a book discussion just like this. And at the end of that session, I remember telling her, we look forward to your second book. And now I'm very happy to see that not only has she written a second book, but a third book, the one that we are about to discuss just now. I think that you will find it a very interesting, if not an unusual book. The reason is most of the books today that are written in China, in India about China, I would say about 80% are on geopolitics or security, another 10 to 15% maybe on economic relations. And in the balance, everything else is squeezed: environment, social relations, culture, all the rest of it. This proportion seems a little bit skewed. And I think when we understand what those dimensions can add to our total understanding of China, we may take and we may be able to take very fresh views. Now, I won't say very much more. I will just set out the rules for the forthcoming session. Basically, Poonam will talk about the book now for about 20 minutes. Basically, why she wrote this book, what were the conditions under which she thought about and wrote this book, and some of the highlights that she has covered in the book. After that, Professor Srimati Chakravarti, who's also been introduced, she will add her comments for about 10 minutes. Poonam will speak for about 20 minutes, Srimati for 10 minutes, and then I will add my comments for another 10 minutes. After that, we will invite Poonam back to respond to some of these observations for another 10 minutes, and then we will turn the discussion over to the floor for questions and answers. So that's the sort of state of play. I think Amit has already explained about the chat box and everything else, so I won't repeat that. So, Poonam, let me straight away ask you, why did you write this book? And what would you like to tell us about it?
Thank you. I would like to start by thanking the Institute of Chinese Studies for arranging this discussion. And thank you, Amit, for the nice introduction. And I would like to specifically thank Professor Alka Acharya for her constant support and encouragement, and also Professor Srimati Chakrabarti and you, Ravi Buthalingam, for being panelists. So thank you very much. And this is an interesting question. I'm going to talk about what's in my book, a little bit about an idea about what I've covered. But how I started writing it is an interesting question. It's about observations about society. I know that the society, we don't know that much about each other, the Indian and Chinese societies. And I have some friends who I speak to constantly, Chinese friends, and very similar mindsets. And then what happened was I started writing the book, and then we came upon this pandemic, and it totally took us over. And I remember, I'm just going to quote something from my book, and then I will go on and tell you what I've written. The recent coronavirus epidemic that has taken the toll around the world has made us realize how connected the world is, and how ultimately we have to value the humane values of life, and realize that without them, we are rudderless ships that follow a directionless path. So there were some thoughts in my mind when we went through this trauma that everyone faced, which I call a global earthquake. And this prompted me to write about a lot of things, about a lot of psychological and philosophical things, which I may not have written about. And this was because there was some connection to the foundation of what we are as humans and our relationships with the rest of the world. And these are all things which, as an Indian, I have written because my feet are firmly in the foundation of my soil. And I'm writing as an Indian, but with observations about China. And I came up with a lot of commonalities, and I wanted to express those and write this book. So my interest in China developed when we lived there. Beijing was lively and interesting. The country was beautiful, but a bit of a mystery, and I wanted to explore and delve into the mindsets of the current society and into the past, and to look at the commonalities with India and the many footprints across the terrain, which may still have significance for the two countries. Collaboration and cooperation could be the launching pad for the future, and the multiple similarities and commonalities could be significant for the so-called Asian century, which was at one point in time quite significant. But things have changed. The fundamental reason for that is that China now believes that it has become powerful enough to impose its will not only in Asia, but in the world at large. But there is hope still, hope remains. To understand the society and culture of a country, it is important to delve into multiple aspects. Chinese society is changing in many ways, and there are many negotiations between the Communist Party, private companies, and society in both the rural and urban areas. And authoritarianism and control are accepted by society as a norm, as long as they are moving along a prosperous route under the radar of the party. And this is because of capitalism, the Confucian legacy of collective thinking may have been left behind to a certain extent. What we are seeing is therefore an amalgamation of modernity and tradition, of cultural values which are significant today in the globalized world and have merged into the material outlook of the world as it is today. Modern China is a complex amalgamation of political ideologies which are centered on the power of the leadership and capitalism with Chinese characteristics, wherein the private sector is curtailed by political factors and controlled by the party in many ways. Religion and spirituality are also factors which play a role in making people aware of their traditions and philosophies, and also as a calming balm and quite significantly as a fundraiser for tourism, but at the same time are being used by the party as a control mechanism. The ideologies which are being talked about by the leadership are Marxism with Chinese characteristics, socialism with Chinese characteristics, and the rule of law, again with Chinese characteristics, not to forget grassroots democracy and nationalism, which talks about the state for the people and people for the state. However, there is a complex relationship between the party and society, and there are constant negotiations with the people, as this audience knows. This audience needs no reminder of the successful China economic model, which, however, has begun to lose steam and needs to be transformed and reformed. The fact is that China is today the second largest economy in the world. And with a sound science and technology foundation and modernized defense forces, this provides China with opportunities to seek new ways and means of reforming and restructuring its economic system. For over 2 decades, it has been trying to go into consumption-led growth rather than depend on exports. However, new challenges have emerged, and to ensure that China can continue to grow on a sustainable basis and to reduce dependence on external technology, the focus has shifted to innovation and domestic technology development, including in all futuristic domains such as artificial intelligence, quantum, cyber, robotics, green energy, etc. The book covers societal issues, gender issues, and many other concerns, including environmental goals, the animal-human interface, and the impact of religious beliefs in China. Historical baggage plays a very important role in future decisions and optics, which are important in order to decipher the present and for the generations to come. The attempt is to look at the broader picture and a vision which looks at society through the lens of beliefs and ideologies, which shape the past and will be a precursor for the future. Living in China was a unique experience, and the beautiful, vibrant, and diverse scenery across the country added to it. The flow of the land, the rivers, and the mountains were a reminder that the world is one. Each country has its unique character and makes its mark in the world. Nevertheless, change is inevitable. Tradition and ancient philosophies are again being searched in order to give us answers to the questions in our lives. Xi Jinping talked about the Chinese traditional culture, which includes pursuing common good for all, regarding the people as a foundation of the state, governing by virtue, selecting officials on the basis of merit, promoting harmony between humanity and nature, and fostering neighborliness. He emphasized that history and culture are important and they should make the past serve the present and provide a solid foundation that enables China to have a firm footing amidst global cultural interaction. The beliefs, philosophies, and ideologies of the past shape our contemporary beliefs and ethics, even though in this globalized world, imbibing from other countries and communities and adjusting and adapting to the new norms is a given as we move on to an era which gives us access to multiple options which can improve our lives in many ways. The ritualistic and symbolic history should imbibe the contemporary and hence should be an amalgamation of the traditional and modern. The crisscrossing of footprints and caravan tracks is scattered all over the Silk Road. One would say that across the different boundaries and borders of the Asia, an attempt can be made to develop a common ground for a deeper understanding of Asian values and philosophies. If we look at the sacred geography of the Asian subcontinent extending towards Central Asia and China, we can see the footprints of Buddha in North India and subsequently of Buddhism across the region. Footprints of well-known scholars such as Kumarajiva extend from Kashmir to central China and have left their mark on the translations of Buddhist sutras, which can be heard along with the bells of the temples and the shlokas in the courtyards of the Buddhist temples across China. And the word Amitabha, which is a common slogan put forth by Hui Yuan, the Mahayana Buddhist monk in China, to be chanted by the Sanghas and by the citizens, a single word rather than going into deep rituals. And we also hear a lot about people's Buddhism, which is actually not rituals, but across society, ethics. Since antiquity, borders and territories have been an inseparable part of nation building. Nomadic cultures, tribal clans, and cultural similarities have played a part in shifting the balance in politics. Power blocks and conflicts have been a concern since time immemorial, but since the beginning of the 21st century, there is a fresh consciousness of these equations. Terrestrial and territorial issues persist as roadblocks, and added to these are maritime concerns in the case of Asia, the focus being the Indian Ocean, the South China Sea, and Indo-Pacific realm. The conventional techniques of force and domination are not the way to go. And as insecurity and uncertainty increases, we need to rethink and reassess the future with a view to minimizing human conflict and finding new instruments of peace and nonviolence. Society governance and political maneuvering and negotiations have been a part of the statecraft of all countries since ancient times. Looking at contemporary China, negotiations across the realm of society and the party state, ideologies and governance are interconnected and intertwined and play an important role in the treasury and exchequer and the progress of the economy. The relevance of Chanakya or Kautilya and Confucius and the ideologies associated with them have been discussed in this book. The Chinese economy has done well in the past, poverty alleviation has been significant, and the standards of living of the people have improved tremendously. Growth in agriculture and off-farm employment has increased the income of farmers. Productivity levels have gone up because of this, as well as other factors such as new technology. The last 2 decades and more have seen a lot of change in China. The reaching out to the world, the coming out party at the Olympics 2008, the effort to be a part of the globalized world through people-to-people interactions and trade agreements were positive factors for the Chinese economy, as well as soft power initiatives as far as the world is concerned. However, surveillance and controls have increased tremendously. China has advanced economically in the technological and many other fields. For domestic circulation, rural revitalization plays an important role in the development plan. Rural cultural industries can promote domestic circulation, and hence it should be recognized that rural cultural industries and products are part of this policy and will have a positive impact on the economy, enrich people's needs for diversified consumption, and encourage rural people's wealth accumulation. Around the world, ethnic and rural communities have played an important role in preserving the environment and sustainability by following their traditional cultures and beliefs, most of which were practical and relevant in the conditions that they had been living in for years. It has been seen that culture influences economic development. Many economists and sociologists have been experimenting with data collected from different sources and how data can be used for different kinds of modeling for various purposes. Mindsets and social attitudes can be shifted to promote development and reduce social exclusion. Therefore, Homo economicus has been a topic of discussion on which economists and sociologists have different views. While economists have recognized that decision-making is not always rational and consistent, they have had a hard time factoring into their models why this is so. but a growing body of research in the field of behavioral economics, which was made aware to the world by Professor Richard Thaler when he got the Nobel Prize for this in 2016, has highlighted the importance of context and culture in shaping decision making. Thus, development and progress are seen as changing not only incentives, what Homo economicus responds to, but also mindsets. Xi Jinping's belief is that the East is rising and the West is declining, and his intention is to do everything possible to move the world in that direction. In proposing the Global Civilization Initiative, Xi has advocated the importance of civilization inheritance and respect for the diversity of world civilizations. Modernization, he pointed out, does not mean the decline of civilizations, but in fact the rebirth of traditional culture. The Global Development Initiative and the Global Security Initiative are also meant to have similar aims. According to the Chinese, Xi Jinping's proposals regarding the GDI, GSI, and GSI are intended to work to ensure that international institutions work from a global perspective for the benefit of all, and not simply to further the interests of the few developed countries of the West. It remains to be seen whether in fact this is the objective or whether the objective is to lead to China's emergence as the most dominant power in the world. For China, the aging population is a big challenge. High costs of housing and education have made a lot of young people decide not to have children or at most one child, even though the one-child policy has taken a turn for the two and now three-child policy. The working age population has declined. More resources are needed for the aging population as they need more health and elderly care. However, one view is that the population issue may not be as negative as it appears to be. With technological progress and innovation, the digital workspaces, AI, robotic science, etc., some percentage of the labor may be replaced by digital solutions, and that would change the marketplace and workspaces. The platform economy might mean that many young people would have the time to fulfill their aspirations of working in their areas of interest, and the gig economy will be very much a part of the current scenario. The other way of looking at this is that as the population gets more educated and thus productivity rises, the economy will pick up and do better. It is not just the population figures that have an impact on whether the economy will do well. Technological advancement, innovation, productivity, and education with improved health facilities to improve life expectancy and make an impact on the growth of the economy. With improved health facilities, there will be a healthier population. Thus, aging people who are in good health and want to continue to work should be encouraged. And with the background traditions of frugality, hard work, and aspirations to do well, this could benefit the population and the economy. It will be beneficial for the Chinese economy if the government encourages the private sector by supporting private companies and markets. The Chinese society is on a roller coaster ride. As long as the material benefits of the party state are being made use of, the internal simmering and protestation is covered by a smoke and mirror approach. There are strong crackdowns and restrictions, but also monetary benefits of alliances with the party and the leaders of the leaders. As of now, the leadership of the party continues to put restrictions on private sector and reinvigorate state-owned enterprises. In the Goldman Sachs interview with the Asia Society Policy Institute Center for China Analysis in October 2022, the views of the experts were that Xi will continue his efforts to make China economically and technologically self-reliant through indigenous innovation, as well as selective decoupling to strengthen China's immunity to supply chain disruptions, especially in semiconductors. He will also persist in increasing his ideological control over the party and the party's control over all aspects of governance and life in China, including through crackdowns on internet speech and cultural freedoms that he sees as dangerous avenues for Western liberalism to infiltrate China. Increased investment in China's new infrastructure related to technology and digitization is predicted to have a positive impact on many sectors of the economy. Social productivity will increase to a new level with the increase in databases. Digitizing the Medicare system, for example, would save resources which can be used for other sectors. Ultra-high voltage would also benefit the different industries. The railway system and transport sector are being boosted with increasing density of urbanization and increase in smart cities and hubs. Digitization will facilitate data collection and power distribution and enable the mass computing power to benefit the industries. The accelerated trend to shift from offline to online processes in various fields, such as education, etc., the increase in data centers, electric vehicle centers, artificial intelligence, and Internet of Things will have a big impact on industrialization and numerous other sectors. Technology continues to revolutionize with the increased numbers of 5G centers, and satellite internet provides a complementary addition to the 5G base stations. This includes ramping up of digital infrastructure, adoption of industrialization IoT, and the vast size of the industry sector, investing into digitized, green, and more software. Are traditions and religion a growing challenge or an opportunity for the Communist Party of China? As has been discussed, it is interesting and relevant to observe how religion, especially Buddhism and Confucianism, as well as other traditional philosophies like Daoism, are faring in the current dispensation, whether they are in favor, and if so, to what extent must they be contained in order to be of use to the Communist Party. The interesting point is how the Communist Party balances its control, keeping in mind the mesmerizing pools of wealth and the desire for even more wealth and success among the Chinese people, and keeps the two in tandem with its own trajectory to maintain control. There is little doubt that as long as the people have a good life and plenty of money, the party will be able to carry on along this path. Together with the wealth, it obviously has been realized that a peppering of tradition and religiosity would add to the success. However, there is definitely simmering under the surface dissent and anger, which might just be vented out in the future, much to the chagrin of the leadership. Religion may therefore not exactly be the opium of the masses, but certainly something that a lot of people are turning to in order to balance their lives, which have been changed with the materialism and wealth which economic development has brought. The issue today is more a humanitarian one rather than a religious one, for it underlines that humans are not machines and never will be. However technologically advanced we may be, the values of human communities and interactions are extremely important. Governance implies different things in different setups, communities, and countries, but ultimately it is the humans who make up the economy, and thus behavioral economics is the way to go, however relevant mathematical equations and analysis may be. Youth unemployment stands at a record high. Economic uncertainty has driven temple visits and tourism to new heights, according to analysts and travel websites. No school going, no hard working, only incense burning has been a popular hashtag on social media since March 2023, referring to a growing trend among young people in China who escape a pressure cooker society by going to temples to pray for luck. Incense burning youth has become the #1 catchphrase in China's tourism industry this year. Ecological advancement has also been given importance. Conservation, pollution control, and sustainability are being given due importance, and the pledge is to reach peak carbon emissions reduction before 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality before 2060. As correctly stated by Tan Sen, religion and culture lubricate the wheels of commerce. The world is a conglomerate of boxes, various cultures and social faiths, which stand in a common space, where on the one hand they have their own identity and beliefs, and on the other there is a whole sphere where the boxes fill a space which is common to the world. The Chinese society is on a bumpy ride. There was, as we know, a demographic U-turn, and this is not working as of now. As young couples are not keen to have more than one child because of high expenses, lack of domestic help, as inability of the older grandparent generation to look after their grandchildren, as the young couples have moved to different cities and are now nuclear families. The philosophies of Buddhism, Confucianism, and Daoism are still relevant, and filial piety, respect for elders, face saving, and networking are now taking on a different stance with the moving tides of modernity. Local governments in China are offering cash rewards and other incentives to matchmakers, an ancient profession now back in the spotlight, and anxieties over rural unmarried men. As long as social change continues in the current direction, that is increasing urbanization, globalization, and migration, the role of religion will continue to grow. Religions in China flourishing under the shadow of political approval. The party is supreme and the party decides what exactly it wants to permit, to promote, and contain. Whether it be Buddhism or any Islam, Christianity, it is indeed stitched with the political fabric of China and colored with Chinese characteristics. As it has done with Confucianism, aspects of these religions which suited the regimes were appropriately incorporated in the regime's rhetoric, and other inconvenient aspects were swept under the carpet. Hui Yuan, who died in 416 AD, wrote the text on why monks should now bow down before kings in 404 AD. Hui Yuan was posthumously named the first patriarch of the Pure Land school of Buddhism. If we let our imagination run riot for a moment, we can well imagine what it would mean for the party or if Buddhists were to revert to his way of thinking. I will stop there for the moment. Oh, can't hear you, Ravi.
Sorry. Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Poonam. I think in a little over 20 minutes.
Sorry about that.
Taste. No, that's fine. You've given us a taste of a book which really covers a huge range of topics. After all, tradition and modernity intersect virtually everything we do. So I think you've opened the gates, as it were, and in the discussion to come, I'm sure very much more of the book will be explored. So let me now turn to Professor Srimati Chakrabarti and ask her to give us her views and reflections on the book.
Can't hear you, Srimati.
Srimati, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay, I begin by congratulating Poonam for writing such an interesting and useful book. And I enjoyed reading it, and I'm sure others also will, get a lot of information about China from this book. And this book was like a breath of fresh air because it is so different from, as Ravi said, books on strategy, geopolitics, foreign policy, etc. So that way, this book makes a useful contribution to the study of present day China. Now, it's within this time span, it's not really possible to, discuss almost everything. But I'll basically ask questions which Poonam can answer later. But every question will have a little background to it. Now, I begin with Buddhism. Religion in China has always been a mix of Confucianism, Buddhism, Taoism, and folk religion. China never really had a state religion per se. And it was only during the Tang dynasty, 300 or 400 years, that too not the entire Tang dynasty, Buddhism was popularized. And there was an empress called Wu Zetian who was the main patronizer of this of Buddhism. Now, present-day Buddhism in China is in silos, two different boxes. One is Tibetan Buddhism, and the other is non-Tibetan. Tibetan Buddhism is looked at with some suspicion for obvious reasons, and it is the non-Tibetan Buddhism which is patronized by the state and the party. And monasteries are no longer what they used to be, nor are the monks. Now, monasteries have become commercial ventures, and monks are into making money. And corruption is rampant. This, of course, I did not know, so I found that this really, interesting and informative. So I just read a paragraph from Poonam's book on this corruption in, or a different kind of life that the monks are now leading. The way of life of a believer or a monk is frugal, and an ascetic would meditate on a mountain in isolation. The frugality is in direct contestation with the material objects and ritual icons because they are in complete contrast. The monk is supposed to clean his bowl and not waste any food, in keeping with the ascetic way of life. The life of a monk is supposed to be very simple and humble. However, if one visits a temple or a monastery in China, one finds that the life of the monks has changed in keeping with the times and the developing technology. The rooms of the monks in many of the temples are air conditioned. Many of the monks are educated and have been sent abroad to study management and acquire degrees in order to deal with the management of the temple economy in tandem with the changing conditions. In many cases, the monks are inclined towards seeking commercial ventures and deals with various tourist projects. So much about Buddhist monks in China. Now, the first question I have is, how is the CCP, Chinese Communist Party, using non-Tibetan Buddhism, in practical terms? We all know that they are being, patronized and supported by them, mainly their associations, all over China, in every province. But what are the manifestations of this uh, support? Okay, now lot of space. Okay, yeah, okay. I hope you've noted the question, right? No.
I'm
Okay,
sorry.
noted the question, right?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so you can answer them, later.
I will. Yes, please.
Now, there is a full chapter on Kautilya and Confucius. Now, Kautilya was known for the principles of statecraft, management of the economy, etc., while Confucius was concerned mainly with the philosophy where human relations is the focus. Yes, there are similarities too, but did Kautilyaism, if one can use that term, have any influence on the Chinese in ancient period? Present period, they have, because their way of management of economy is strikingly similar to what Kautilya said. Although I'm sure they have not read, they have not got it from Kautilya, but whatever that shows the far-sightedness of Kautilya. So we don't know exactly how today it is affecting. Today it is having an influence in China, but. Uh, you know, whatever is prescribed in Kautilya's Arthashastra seems to be, one can see that to a great extent. Now, you've devoted so much space to Kautilya. How was it relevant to China in that period? Or maybe you wish to say that it was not relevant just for the sake of comparison, you've done it. But anyway, you can consider this. Now, basic tenets of Buddhism are very much in clash with Confucianism, because Buddhism talks about equality and Confucianism about hierarchy. Now, Confucius laid down ethical norms for society for harmony and stability in order to achieve that, both the state and the family need to have a hierarchy, which means that unless you have a hierarchy, there is no possibility of harmony or stability. So therefore, around the time of the May 4th movement, uh, Confucius is condemned by progressives because he talks about inequality in society. And not only by the progressives, but the liberals, the Marxists, and other elements who were other people who were participants in the May 4th movement, they very, very strongly criticized Confucius. And Confucianism for some period was completely thrown out of China. And Mao also condemned Confucius in many ways, especially during the uh, campaign against Lin Piao. Mao and Lin Piao was, separated ways sometime in 1969, 1970, and before Lin Piao was killed, he and Mao, had very strong differences of opinion. Now, uh, and the campaign that was lodged at that time was called Anti-Confucius, Anti-Lin Piao campaign. Okay, now it's true that Mao was opposed to Confucius, but or everybody else, in the party was. But how is Confucius related to, Lin Piao? You know, I'm not at all, sure about that. So, how, where Lin Piao, I don't think ever said that Confucianism is something which, should be upheld or whatever. However, in the post Mao era, Confucianism has come back with a vengeance, as we all know. Uh, Now, what is your take on this? Why? Of course, one reason people give is that the China needed an alternate ideology because Marxism-Leninism was, no longer, no longer the dominant ideology. But one can also say that in the period after Mao, we have, a very, what should I say, a very very visible, uh, visible ideology, one can say, of, Deng Xiaoping. He talks about, four modernizations. Then comes Jiang Zemin, who talks about three represents, and then Hu Jintao, scientific civilization, or something like that. And now Xi Jinping is talking about, the China dream, and a few other things. So it's not that China has been totally bereft of ideologies. So, I'd like to know from you, what do you think about this? Okay, now, uh, the Xi Jinping era. Xi Jinping era occupies a lot of space in the book, and why not? Because we are writing. I mean, the book is being written during the Xi Jinping era, and we are all, interested to know about this. Xi Jinping, in his speeches and writings, has considered, every subject under the sun. There's not one thing which he has left out. Now he's considered to be very, very different from his predecessors, and sometimes it is said that he's, close to his, his actions and his style of doing things is close to that of Mao. Now, uh, regarding the question of modernization in China, how is she different from Deng Xiaoping, Jiang Zemin, and Hu Jintao? That's, you know, another question. All right. Now, let me move to something different. Unemployment is a major
Srimati,
issue.
may I just remind you that you
I
know
have 2 minutes.
time is passing. Is this your?
Okay, okay, just 2 more
Uh,
minutes. Okay,
yeah.
unemployment has been a big issue in China. So, how do the job seekers therefore look at the regime? Did you get an opportunity to speak with them? I think that's all I have. Uh, Yeah. So, let me one more point. Yeah, I'm very glad that you have a chapter on gender disparity, something which is increasing by the day. The May 4th movement was a landmark in promoting or upholding women's equality, and so did Mao. From even before he became a communist, he was a feminist. Now, not only societal discrimination, but also the state is indulging in discrimination against women. And and one example of this is that the retirement age for women is lower than that of men. Women retire at 55 and men at 58. So, and there are lots of issues, objectification of women, issues that capitalism brings in every society. So, in the earlier period, the All China Women's Federation was quite active. You know, they were very much opposed to women. That when reform of state-owned enterprises was taken place, women were the first to be fired, and they were fired in larger numbers than men. So that means, and the ACWF, raised this issue. Now, today, can they play a meaningful role under the present circumstances? I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Srimati. I think you brought out many, many dimensions of the book. And I rather fear, Poonam, you are going to be swamped with a number of questions. That's only a foretaste. I have a
No
few more,
problem.
but I'll try and limit mine so that we still have enough time for the audience. Well, let me start off again by offering my congratulations and say that I enjoyed reading this book. I would describe it as a reflective book. You explained the circumstances under which you wrote it during the pandemic, which of course uh, promotes this kind of introspective thinking. And you also had a lot of material uh, that you had collected, firstly through your years of living in China, secondly through your travels in China, and thirdly through your research and your continuing contacts. So the book it draws upon all these three sources of your biographical life, your academic life, and your traveling, as it were. But overall, it kind of takes these strands, and there is a reflective process going through, somewhat like climbing a mountain. You go around, and as you go around the mountain and you climb higher, you see different landscapes, and both the ground and the mountain look different from every height that you are on. I found that a very interesting way of writing the book, which also means that I should say that this book demands a little bit of effort. It's not a book that you can pick up at an airport and read on the plane ride of a couple of hours. It stimulates thinking. Uh, the thoughts remain with you and you ponder through them, and they come back again and again. So let me, having said this, before I come to my questions, just make one other remark. That is, I found the areas in the latter half of the book really very interesting. That is, the two subjects dealing with youth and children, the chapter dealing with gender, the one which is quite unusual dealing with animal-human interface, um, the extensive one on environment, and the chapter on population. And these are all, in their own ways, very important if one were to venture a forecast of how these might play out for the future of China. So that brings me to my questions. My first question relates to science. Now, you don't actually address science as a chapter head, but there are elements of it both in your coverage of environment and in how you have tackled the animal-human interface about the pandemic and the transmission of disease and so on. But what I want to ask you is this. From what one reads of Chinese history, science was a very strong theme even starting from the 19th century. And in the early days of the 20th century, Mr. Science and Mr. Democracy was the slogan of the May 1919 movement. And thereafter, with the rise of the communists, science became a very strong plank for development. Zhou Enlai actually had science and technology as one of the four modernizations, and subsequently, science has continued to play what one might call an even greater role. But this has to be seen along with what you've talked about, the governance pattern, which is a mix of Marxism, traditional Chinese imperial traditions, uh, economism, state capitalism, call it what you may. If you put these two together, do you think there is a tendency or a danger for China to become some kind of a technological utopia, technological dystopia, dystopia, in the sense that while science and technology might progress fast, the regulatory and controls to keep it within uh, the kind of constraints required for normal human existence might get weaker. That's one question. The second question is about the new generation which is growing up under these conditions. You describe it, the lying flat syndrome, uh, the remnants of the one child policy, the effect of the one child policy, the rather tepid progress of the two child policy, and of course, the complete non starter of the three child policy. So, how are these children, when they grow up to adulthood, what kind of leaders are they going to become? And how would that affect uh, the future of China? Um, is there what kind of directions can we see there? And lastly, my third question is, you have pointed out a number of commonalities between India and China, the principles of ancient governance in both being very much based on moral character of the ruler, who is focused on the welfare of the people. For example, whether it's called dharma, whether it's called the or ren or so on, and on the family, the accommodative traditions and so on. But these long civilizational learnings in both countries, and both countries have an extraordinarily long unbroken history and tradition and civilization. How can we mobilize this knowledge to address very severe challenges like climate change, which are coming up, and address them in such a way, as it were, overcoming smaller issues, comparatively smaller issues, bilateral issues, more uh, urgent, possibly issues which are more emotive or urgent. Because whatever one might do, it's not a very happy thing if mankind faces existential crisis. And somehow one feels these two ancient civilizations, if any, are the ones to give a lead. So let me stop there. I think there's quite a lot on your plate, Poonam. So I think say 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, 10 minutes if you can.
Okay.
A little more if you must. Okay.
Okay, so I will take Srimati. Thank you for your warm comments. So I wanted to take these questions which you have asked. And the first one was about Buddhism. So there are many benefits that the party can get from non-Tibetan Buddhism. First of all, it's a way of calming the society, especially the younger generation. It's a balm. And there are ways in which the Buddhist Association helps people by giving funds and social services to the needy and vulnerable, which are more preferable for the party than the NGOs giving them. So that is it's a way in which they are actually benefiting from the Buddhist way. The online meetings, when somebody's during the pandemic, there were many people who died, people's family members. And they used to have these online meetings, which were actually much more preferable for the party rather than physical meetings in temples, where a simmering anger would lead to revolts. So they did not want that. So in that way, it helped. The Buddhism helped, Buddhist philosophy. Now, the tourism and the fundraising has become a multi-billion-dollar industry. The funds raised are very useful for the party, as pilgrimage to the Buddhist temples is very popular nationally and internationally. And then soft power initiatives to the Mahayana Buddhism countries. Now, there are some countries where Theravada and Mahayana are there are both, and some in which it is not very clear. But the soft power initiatives, and especially as I was told when I was there, I went to meet the director of the temple, the Fai Yuan temple, and he said China is the center of the Buddhist world. And I was a bit surprised to hear that. But this is the soft power initiative which they can, connect with the other Buddhist countries in Southeast Asia. And yes, of course, corruption. There is corruption, and that is also, I have read about it, and I've been told by one of the monks in the temple that there was corruption. So some people are actually preferring Tibetan Buddhism, but this was not permitted by the party. As you know, it's very clear. So they have tried to keep them within bounds. They keep watch on the temples. There is a person who is in charge of, from the party, who is in charge of controlling what happens in the temples. And also, as we know, the abbot of the temple, who was the president of the Buddhist Association of China, was actually removed because of sexual harassment. So there are many ways, there are many temples where a lot of money is made, but the party is trying to control that. So this is what is my take on the Buddhist issue. There have been marked increase in Buddhists in China in the past 20 years, and 5% to more than 18.3% in 2023 of the population, now estimated to be 300 million, and some hidden Buddhists because they don't always show up as Buddhists. And then we come to this issue of Chanakya and why it has been, spoken about or written about in the book. And this is relevant in all societies, whether it was in ancient times or in the modern era. Statecraft, politics, and the economy, military strategy, all are included in the Arthashastra. Relating to societies and governance is something which is obviously all over the world. Some scholars have called Chanakya the pioneer economist of the world and the Indian Machiavelli. It was combined, the Arthashastra was compiled as a guide to life, living, and society. And the four methods, which I'm going to briefly mention, others: and dund, punishment, are applicable not only in polity, nations, and the corporate world and foreign policy, but in all human relationships. Role of the state in accumulating and sustaining the wealth of the nation, welfare of the people, norms for the ruler and ruled, also deliberations on neighboring countries and their relationships on alliances, treaties, and the conduct for policy based on power play, and penalties and rewards are given to citizens of all categories. So this was what was relevant in the Shastra for even modern society as it is today. I am not sure how or whether it did influence the Chinese, but this is certainly what we are, this is interesting. So you were asking about Confucianism, and my take is that filial piety, benevolence, the many aspects which make education appropriate according to the affinity of the younger people, arbitration instead of fights which cannot be resolved, community peace and friendship, calming the society was very important, is very important. In the corporate sector, profit is not the only important purpose, according to Confucius. We need to look at the benefits of people, educated people rising in the fields they are in, etiquette, manners, the exams which people have to take lead them to promotions, and the system also was against corruption. As we know, Peter Drucker said, who was the management guru, said that Confucian ethics is the best management strategy. So I feel that these were the things that are being used by the party state. But we know that there was a statue in Tiananmen Park, which was put there in 2011 and was removed instantly. Statue of Confucius. And when I went and spoke to these people, they said that this is certainly not the ideology of the party. So there are different ways of looking at it. Some of the things which have been swept under the carpet because Confucius said that if you do not like the leader, then you can remove the leader. And this is not something which the present dispensation will permit. Technological advance, cultural priorities now, surveillance, control mechanisms, and more strict approach, more controls. More than modernism, it's a reversal of some issues. We were talking about the Xi Jinping era and how it's different. And the downsides are that technology can be used in ways which are more aligned towards surveillance and control. So there is a lot of stress, a lot of emphasis on science and technology. That is the difference among other differences, between the past and Xi Jinping era. Now, the thing about labor and unemployment, the 996 generation lying flat is not happy. They feel they are overworked and do not get time to relax and enjoy their earnings. The preference is for students who have the employment preference is for students who have just graduated, since they will need to be paid less and may be more productive and willing to learn and adapt. The job seekers may not show it, but there is perhaps a simmering and resentment. Many of them have moved to other countries, and this is a way of, showing that they are not happy with the current situation. Now we come to the All China Women's Federation. Now, up to a certain limit, the ACWF will certainly have its role to play in improving gender issues, but the three-child demographic policy will have an impact on the role of women. Many women are successful entrepreneurs and are doing well, but the pressure to be the child bearer will, to a certain extent, together with the mental conditioning that the important role of women is that parenting and looking after the family is the main priority is definitely existing. So the AACWF certainly has a role to play in gender parity, but how effective it will be is a question which does not have a clear answer. It is the official state-sponsored organization representing women's interests in the PRC, founded in April 1949, has the basic mission of representing and safeguarding the rights of women, promoting gender equality, and by increasing literacy rates and technical skills, employment opportunities, family welfare, poverty alleviation, provincial and the political participation of women at national, provincial, county, country, town, and village levels, each tier being under the direct supervision of the CCP. So it has a dual role, state policy implementation and looking after women's interests. And this is difficult to say how successful they will be in this, the gender issues. So I think that is what Srimati, you had wanted me to answer. And now we come to Ravi's questions. And as far as science is concerned, we know that there were a lot of Sanskrit scriptures in India, which had a lot of things which are still being searched for and investigated, even by the surgeons today. There was a talk from a surgeon who had come from London, and he was telling us how these are so relevant even today. And as far as the Chinese are concerned, the China's modernization, science and democracy was the slogan. We have to, I'll tell you about, as we know about the past, that until the early years of the Ming Dynasty, China was a global science and technology leader with ancient innovations, for example, paper making, compass, gunpowder printing, contributing to the development of ancient and medieval East Asia and Europe. Then, during the Han Dynasty, Confucian cultural ethos looked down on science and technology and emphasized literature, arts, and public administration. And then, of course, we see that being defeated by Japan and Western nations in the 19th century, Chinese reformers started promoting modern science and technology as part of the self-strengthening movement. The Cultural Revolution brought many negative effects and disruptions to science and technology. In 1976, after Mao's death, science and technology was established as one of the four modernizations, as we know. Deng Xiaoping reversed the policies of the Cultural Revolution. During the last 30 years, China has concentrated on building infrastructure, roads and ports, and many economic and technological development zones, expanded from 14 to 54. China ranks #1 globally in patents, utility model, trademarks, industrial designs, and creative goods exports, and many science and technology clusters. The figures that we have are that the current, they are doing very well in science and technology. There is, I'm sorry, I've lost the figure somewhere. Just a moment, please. Yes, the central government budget is now, according to the World Bank report, 371 billion this year, 371 billion yuan this year. And in 2021, it was 2.43% of GDP compared to 0.65 in India. So they're doing very well. They're investing a lot of money. And as we know, Xi Jinping is emphasizing and giving great importance to science and technology. And what was the next question? Ravi, what was the next question?
The next question was new generation.
Yes, right. So
the new generation and how it will pan out as, how they will pan out as leaders in the light of their experience.
And that is a question which you and I may not be able to answer. I do think in this globalized world with the children, with the younger generation, looking at other countries and getting experiences from other countries, studying there, coming back, they will definitely want a different way of, moving ahead. So this is a question which remains uncertain. We will see when the time comes. Is that all, Ravi?
No, there was one more. It's quite a load, I can understand. The one about how India's and China's civilizational learnings, traditions can help us manage the existential crises which are coming very rapidly at us by way of climate change and other things. Despite our mutual issues with each other and other countries.
Okay, so well, in a way, the cooperation could have made a big difference. And of course, we cannot deal with the whole world and solve all the problems of the world in terms of climate change and environmental issues. But being populous countries, we can certainly make an effort. We can help our own countries. We can help, we can have an Asia sort of connection, and certainly try and get the world into a situation where we can be the leaders and try to solve some problems. But of course, we need cooperation and collaboration from all the other countries all over the world. We can't do it on our own.
Thank you, Poonam. It's a vast range, as you can see from these few questions that have come up. And it just shows you the kind of, the sort of plethora of issues and reflections that come to mind when one reads your book. So let me now go on to the chat box and to the participants. I can't see anything in the chat box, but Amit, can you see any questions?
I see one.
As of now, we don't have any questions in the chat box.
Oh, okay. Right. Any raised hands?
No, as of now, nobody has raised.
Anyone would like to ask a question at this stage? If so,
Mr.
please.
Bhutaningam, we have a raised hand from Era Mushraf.
Hello, everybody. Good morning from the UK. Thank you very much for the opportunity to listen to what seems to be a very in-depth and very broad work on contemporary China. I'm actually fascinated in terms of your approach to these ideas. Because you began your talk with the fact that you, as your personal experiences in China, kind of took you onto the path of writing on China. So when I read about the gender issues that you were touching on, I thought that would be interesting for me to understand that as a woman from the Indian subcontinent, when you are living in another country and you are writing about gender issues in that particular context, what were the nuances that perhaps you felt have changed over the years? So when you were there in the past, and now when you're writing on, so you touched on certain things such as the family business, the role, the encouragement of having more families now, moving away from the one-child policy of China. So naturally there is a change. So how do you look at those changes in contemporary China? So I'd be interested from that perspective, if you don't mind. Thank you.
I think, what happened has now been in the past. And since we were there, I have seen a lot of very successful women who are doing good business and who are working. And of course, the conditioning in the mind is, of course, will stay for, I don't know till when, about women being the family carers and about being mothers and priorities being looking after children. But now that the three-child policy has been, they're encouraging women. Xi Jinping is actually encouraging women to become mothers and look after the children. So this is a very, this era is going to be a little different from what I feel was in the past. And of course, women were, during the Mao era, they were the ones who were half, lifting half the sky, whatever it was. And there was a big difference that came up at that time. And I find that women are doing well. And now, I don't know, it's not an easy question to answer.
Right. And the reason I ask is because of the leadership, that while, for example, we look at World Bank reports on gender equality globally, but we look at the broad spectrum of employment and education that the women of China have done well in. But when we look at political leadership, we see in the leadership roles, they're still struggling. Yes. And so when we look, for example, countries in the Indian subcontinent, even countries such as, India is very well advanced in that, I suppose. But even countries like Bangladesh and Pakistan, when you have women, female in leadership roles, and you compare them to what is happening in China, it's like there's still a huge gap there in China that they have to cover.
You're absolutely right. When it comes to political things, when it comes to the party, yes, there is a boys' club. And even if women are encouraged to join in, but they will be given roles or certain jobs which are not the primary ones. And the thing is that now there may be a one child in the family who may be a woman who joins the party, and she may have connections because of her father or whatever, and that might help her to become successful. But on the whole, yes, this boys' club dominates. So they need to do a lot for that.
Thank you. I think several questions have come on to the chat box. Amit, could you read them out?
The Mr. Rajkumar is asking, how do you view the current state of Vajrayana Buddhism in People's Republic of China in comparison with Mahayana Buddhism, Confucianism, Daoism, and Catholicism? And what are the CPC's views on it?
I think Buddhism is one of the safer ones as far as the party is concerned because they have control over it. Christianity is thought of as bringing influence from the West. They are not very happy with that, although they had, sort of handout of arrangement uh, you know, with the Western side, and they had also tried to put, these people who were approved by them. But I think Buddhism is considered to be a more peaceful and more controllable religion.
His question, I think, focused more on Vajrayana Buddhism, the Tibetan version.
Well, that's because it's the Dalai Lamas. I think that's why they don't encourage that. So they don't have trust in that. That's why this is the Buddhism that with Chinese characteristics is the favored one, the Mahayana one.
Thank you.
There's another question addressed to Ms. Suri. Can India regain her Western heaven status in the mind of PRC's people in medium to long term, as India could become second economy in the world after PRC as of 2050?
Could you please explain that question to me again?
I'll repeat that question, ma'am. Can India regain her Western heaven status in the mind of PRC's people in medium to long term, as India could become second economy in the world after PRC as of 2050?
Well, I think, this is a question which will need some time for us to decipher what's going to happen. Yes, there is a bit of a gap between China and the USA, and India is moving closer. So we'll have to wait and see what happens.
There is another question addressed to Professor Chakrabarti. Can China and India have a new module Vivendi based on Chindian culture in Indochina, and has PRC and India researched over it?
Whether there is research on
Chindian culture.
Chindian culture, okay. I don't know if there is something called Chindian culture really. That was, an imagination of Jairam Ramesh. He wrote a book on that. But I think that Chindia period is now over, and honestly speaking, it was never there except those, 7 or 8 years of Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai. After that, things have not really been good enough to think of, India and China as, co-partners. And even today, that is the case. Poonam mentioned that India's recent, closeness with the United States is very much resented upon by the Chinese, and historically, actually, it's little, what should I say, little unfortunate that in the 19th century, because of British colonialism, Indian and Chinese, India's and I mean Indian, the image of India in China, you know, deteriorated very, very fast because in areas where the British had their concessions, the security guards were all Indians, and they would beat up the local Chinese for anything that was perceived as wrong. And for the average Chinese, the Indian was the enemy because they did not understand, they did not quite see, that they were being, made to do this by their employers, and these people were doing it because that was the bread and butter to go and work in China. So this kind of a dislike for India continued, and in a way it continues still today. If you look at social media in China today, you will find that there is a lot of condemnation of India, especially in the last few years. So I'm skeptic about this. I don't know whether Chindia will ever come into existence. Maybe 50 years from now, not in my lifetime at least. You may see it. Sorry, I shouldn't have taken so long to answer this.
Next,
Professor, there is
next.
another question addressed to you. What is the status of Chinese research over Indian literature on China after 1980s and 1990s, which has been in decline as both countries turned towards Western world?
Who is this question addressed to?
To
Ma'am,
you,
to you,
to
ma'am.
you.
To me. Well,
Yes.
well, okay. What about literature? India. Well, I think Shaburi is the best person to answer this. But Indian literature in China. That's what uh, the
Yes, Professor.
question is. Indian literature in China. Well,
Yes, Professor.
Tagore is still very popular, and some works of Premchand have been translated. And in universities where they teach Hindi, there is some amount of interest in China, but in India, but then that is very limited compared to, say, French, German, Spanish. Indian literature is, I would say, secondary still compared to others. And the main reason for this is that there is nothing called Indian literature as such, because we have Hindi literature, Tamil literature, Bengali literature, Marathi literature. So there are a variety of literatures. So that is another thing that probably keeps people away from knowing much about India through literature. So that's my take on it. Yeah.
Poonam, would you like to add your observations about India-China popular connections? I'm not talking of the official dealings, but popular images of India and China in India from your experience.
Well, you see, the thing is that we are very similar in terms of mindsets and the way our family, beliefs, the respect we pay to, the close family connections. And so there's a lot of similarity in the way we think. And people are friendly. I find them very friendly because the few people I know, I've been in touch with them over the years, and they're very nice. But the thing is that I think the general population, the citizens are friendly, but of course, then we are restricted by, the leadership and other political and such factors. So, as far as the literature is concerned, they are very interested in Gandhi, in Tagore, in other philosophies. I have seen a lot of academics who have come to India to search for these things, to actually find them, uh, the sort of way in which they have to follow. They want to make their philosophies somehow attuned to our Indian philosophies. So they do a lot of research on that. I've met some people who've been doing that.
So, Poonam, let me ask you, you've written 3 books. After the first book, I asked you whether you will write another one. You wrote another 2. Now that you've written 3, are you going to extend this to a quartet? And if so,
I
what
don't
are
know.
you thinking about?
I still have to start thinking now. So we'll see as and when it happens.
Probably some of the questions in today's discussion might have given you food for thought.
Yes,
And if so, maybe a germ of an idea might have
yes,
arisen to which we can
exactly. It
all
might
look
just
forward.
grow into a little tree. Yes, you're right. I hope it does.
Amit, if there are no other questions, uh, I think then we can draw the session to a close. Is there anything else there?
There are no questions in the chat box as of now. We have addressed all and nothing in the YouTube chat box.
Right. Then, Poonam, let me once again thank you on behalf of the Institute of Chinese Studies and all those who are listening right now. And this session will be on our YouTube channel as well later on. So many more will be able to see it. I personally think your book will arouse a lot of interest. Even in this short session, you've seen the range of questions that have come up. And I look forward to many more discussions on this subject amongst our everyone who is interested in discourse between India and China.
And the
Thank you
fourth
very
book.
much once again.
And the fourth book.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
Thank you.
fourth book by popular demand. Thank you, Srimati. Thank you, Poonam. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you, Mr. Bhutalingam. I seek your permission to formally bring an end to today's session.
Fine. Please go ahead.
With this, we conclude the session and express our gratitude to Ms. Suri, Professor Chakravarti, and Mr. Bhutalingam for taking time out of their busy schedules and sharing their time with us. The video of today's book discussion will be accessible on the ICS YouTube platform. We extend a warm invitation to all for the upcoming Wednesday seminar scheduled for 24th April 2024. Details about the event can be found on the ICS website, or you can also subscribe to our newsletter for regular updates. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.